Centuries ago, the cataclysm shattered the second moon and flooded the powerful human empire of Thrashar. From the ruins arose 6 nations, young and full of promise. But beware, otherworldly creatures haunt the wildlands, and monsters lurk in the shadows of the world. They have not forgotten, nor can they forgive the injustices inflicted upon them. Armed with old magic and new technology, humanity is poised to reclaim the glories of the past and dominate the world of Nuadan once more. These are the Nuadan Chronicles, a record of heroes and villains, monsters and myth. I look forward to telling your story.
Okay, can we see me? Because my thing on the end just went black. I can't see anything through there, but I can see that I'm on Twitch. So good enough. Hey, welcome everyone. If you'll notice, it's just me and some strange person you've never met before, but that's okay. So long story short, everyone in the cast had like a little thing that came up that just kind of just threw them off. So we were initially going to kind of just cancel tonight, but I thought it would be a really cool idea to bring in the creators of the Nuadan Chronicles and just kind of talk about what it was creating this world, what's it like to just make an RPG, just different questions. And that way so you don't kind of miss out on something fun to do today on Tuesday, learn a little bit more, and then hopefully... I'm pretty sure everything will be fine next week, and we'll be able to figure out what happened to our heroes after they escaped the Tomb of the Watcher. With us, we have Brooke from Broken Dice Games, and you guys don't know Brooke, but I've actually had a lot of conversations. And wait, see, which way are you? You're not over here? Yeah, there you are. You're over here. I've had a lot of conversations with you, but everyone doesn't know you. So why don't you go ahead, introduce yourself, and tell us a little bit about Broken Dice and what started it.
Hi, yes, thank you. Now that my cat is no longer harassing me.
It's okay.
Hi, I'm Brooke. I'm co-founder of Broken Dice. I'm writing and working on the Nuadan Chronicles, and I've been doing that for like 8 years now with my husband, Jason. He can't be here because he's working right now.
Well, that's okay. That's all right.
This is Liara.
Hey, you know what? That's Jason. Jason's been turned into a cat. He can sit in for him, so that's okay. It makes charming interviews to get cat tail slapped. It's great. So all right. Well, I'm excited to have you here today, and so everyone can kind of meet you. So Brooke and I, when I kind of was brought on board to come up with the story, I got to have a lot of chat with Brooke just about different ideas of coming up with the game. So, but before we talk about the show, let's just talk about the Nuadan Chronicles in general. So, let's see here. If you had to give me the elevator pitch of the Nuadan Chronicles, Brooke, like you have 60 seconds to tell me what the world was about. And I know probably most of our viewers who've been watching live know about a little bit, but who knows? Someone could be watching this later on YouTube. You guys could be something else. So what is the Nuadan Chronicles from you, the writer?
So the Nuadan Chronicles, we describe it as a post-apocalyptic fantasy. So it's on this world that's not Earth, that suffered this devastating cataclysm several hundred years ago. And now, fast forward, you're in this society that's like a mixture of science fantasy. So you have airships and like really cool flux engines. You have flux crystals and magic. You have elemental monsters that roam the world that can be really tiny or massive. And through it all, we have shadowy organizations, different religious sects, political groups, all vying for power. And then, of course, in the backdrop, there's a bit of mysticism and the themes of fate that have been present since the creation of the world that are coming to a head in the current age. And so you're sort of in the middle of all this, making choices, making discoveries, and making friendships along the way, hopefully.
Oh, yes, as happening in our show. I enjoy the little things that make a show and or that makes a story work. As I realize I'm looking at me, I'm already super white, but I'm like radioactive glow. I'm just gonna turn down that light.
You're glowing
There we
with
go.
Game
Yeah,
Master
no.
energy.
Yeah, exactly. This isn't even my final form. So yeah, so I guess if you had to tell me, and maybe this is Jason's idea, what gave you the idea? If you had to picture, like, when I come up with stories and or settings and, in my creative mind, there's usually something I can trace it to. And sometimes it has very little to do, like, with the final product. But there was this thing that I went, oh, wouldn't that be neat? And then, as you said, 8 years later, and here we are. What was that moment that started it all?
So, it was originally, we were big fans of Dark Heresy, and that's where we got our D100 system from. That's its sort of ancestor. So we wanted to do our own homebrew. We wanted to do our own world. We wanted to tweak some of the rules because while we liked the system, there were things we wanted to change. And we kept changing, and kept adding. And then I hear Jason in the other room in our apartment at the time, and he's talking to one of our friends, and he's just like, he calls to me, and he's like, Brooke! I'm like, what? And he's like, we're making our own tabletop RPG. And I'm just like, okay. And from there, now that it was our own thing, I had to really think about, okay, this isn't a homebrew anymore. This is its own original setting. I really need to dig in deep to the lore and see what we come up with. And that's when we really started digging into the science fantasy part of it and like how much could we merge that together.
Awesome. So the idea was Dark Heresy, and then you modded it to the point that here we are. And eventually you were like, well, let's do our own thing. That's
yeah, it was like
that can sometimes.
It was like Dark Heresy First Edition. But yeah, so that's where the D100 system. Go ahead.
I'm a little, yeah. So what you don't know, and those on the other end, the system that we use, there is a half a second delay between when we will hear each other. So that's why, if you ever notice, we're always kind of stepping over each other, and that's what's happening. So just to let you know, Brooke, if it seems like I'm cutting you off and then stopping, it's because there's this tiny bit of a delay, enough to just throw us off. But yeah, I do love, for anyone that has seen my other work, anything that's dark and terrible, I love. So I actually knew nothing about Dark Heresy or really Warhammer 40K. I worked in even a game store. Warhammer was that thing over there I didn't really touch. But then I saw the promo for Dark Heresy. It was like, innocence proves nothing. I'm like, that's really dark. Let me read further. And yeah, so I remember Dark Heresy. And now that you mention it, I can see kind of the idea. And I'm wondering, so I guess here's a question for you. Is the kind of advanced, like the magic and the tech, come from Dark Heresy or Warhammer in a way that there's technology we don't completely understand, but there's still magic. Obviously, your magic is quite different. There's a difference between flux and perils of the warp.
I think if there were mirrors of that, it's more like we liked in the 40K universe, whenever you do psychic powers, there's a chance for things to go horribly wrong. And I always like that when you have really powerful magic, but there's a cost to it. And that's where we introduced flux. And so it sort of organically builds rather than it just being a random chance of the dice roll. So that there's sort of this tension that builds whenever you're a caster. I think it's pretty distant from 40K in some senses. I think the closest I get to maybe referencing the 40K universe is with Marith and their inquisitors and having the God Queen as sort of that mirror to the God Emperor. That's my nod.
You're playing the Water Seer and the Inquisitors. I totally forgot about that. That's
yeah, it's kind of sneaky.
Now, yeah. In hindsight, man, I should have been. Well, I mean, she's not like dead on a. She has a tomb. She has a tomb that's guarded. Which, by the way, that lore note might come up later. It's actually interesting as we're sitting here talking about this. Our cast, while they have had access to the book, they've not kind of poured over it as much as I have. And we had a meeting the other day. It was pretty much a whole conversation of, oh my God, where are you getting all this, Adam? We feel so behind. And I'm like, that's my job. My job as the GM is to, and a little bit of a hint with you guys, because I gave the whole setting about a good 80% once over, but it is so massive. I had to pick things to focus on to really get into. So in their mind, I just know everything. And I'm like, no, I picked, like, I knew in the one episode we were going to have the Twin Cities. So I looked up the Twin Cities and found a couple of notes about them. So when I described them on air, it sounds like I know what I'm doing. And what I've done is scared my players. They're like, oh my God, we didn't read that. Hope that's not going to be important. Oh no.
No, I've been really appreciative of how much you've dug into the lore, because I know it's a lot. It's a lot even for me. I'll go back and read something that I wrote and I'll be like, oh yeah, I made this.
Well, I think another fun thing, and we'll go ahead and kind of transition to that question real quick, or just kind of like, what I think is probably interesting for you guys, and I think I've said this to you before, and it's that this is your first time seeing someone else's interpretation of your work. Because like when you guys kind of do play tests, it's from you, and therefore when you make things up, it has a little bit of a sense of authority to it. When I've read something and I get, and I go a different way. So I guess is there anything that I've done so far that that wasn't what you were expecting, where you're like, oh, I didn't expect that. Okay, interesting choice that you can think of?
I'm trying to think. I know Star Oil is sort of a unique thing that you came up with. I think
I did make that up. So little extras. I do a lot of that in the show. I make up little extras like for baptism.
And I think the thing that I'm most interested to see what you develop is the projector that takes them to Tellus Obsidia.
Something I totally made up as well.
Or the hologram, I don't know if it's called the projector, but yeah.
Yeah, well, I just remember, it's as you said, it's a post-apocalyptic world. There was a entire society beforehand. And so I'm like, all right, well, what would that look? And what I wanted to try to do, but unfortunately it's hard to describe something to a modern audience, but then still keep it mystical. Like I was trying to be like, how do I describe this thing that it's a hologram projector, but to people who don't know what a hologram projector is, what does that look like? How do you describe that? And I don't think I did as good of a job as I would have liked, but there's a little bit difference of trying to create the wonder of it, but there's also flying ships. So I'll be like, oh, the idea of this, it's wondrous, but you've seen some stuff in your own day. So yeah, but then I guess, so if that's the thing. Yeah. So just little things I make up. See, now I got totally off track. So, what I've enjoyed on my end with you, at least something that's kind of made me laugh, is every time I come up with an idea, because you guys have written a little bit further, I'll go, oh yeah, so I had this idea, and you guys are like, for example, in the Jengu, I was just talking about like, so they're going to go underwater and they're going to find this artifact, and you're like, oh, well, there's people that live underwater. They're just not in the original book that we gave you. I'm like, oh, okay. So then you guys would. So I've got a little secret there, unless they change it. Some of the stuff that I know is not going to be in the core book, so that's kind of exciting. So what's that like when I would say, I guess the next question is in regards to outside of little things that I've changed. What's the experience like watching someone interpret it? Is it fun? Is it terrifying? Like, I feel like it could be both exciting and like, oh, I hope he doesn't blow this up.
I think it's been a bit exciting because we finally get to see someone else's take on it. It's not us running the game. It's not us running the table. We get to be the audience and step back and see what lens it's interpreted through. And then there is some like anxiety, like, oh, are they going to understand what we wrote? Did we not? It's more like, did we write it clearly? Is this section unclear? Do we need to go back and make some revisions? So I think it's been helpful in that sense because for the most part, it's me and him, and we don't get a lot of feedback because we're such a small, very close team that it's nice to see it in someone else's hands for a change. Because that's the ultimate goal, really.
Yeah, no, indeed. That's I remember when I was talking to you guys back when we first had our like first meeting, that's kind of what I was thinking. I was like, that's because kind of this was the first time I've had, because my first show was on TTRP Theater at the time was the Cult channel, and I had run like maybe 2 cult games, but we were just kind of invited, like, oh yeah, sure, whoever wants to do it. This time, like, someone reached, Weave the Tale came to me because they saw my other stuff and were like, hey, why don't you do this? But this is from like, essentially kind of being hired in a way. Like, here you go, here it is. And that was a little anxiety provoking for me. Like, oh, it's not just, hey, just be on our channel because we want stuff. It was like, no, Broken Dice, you guys came to Weave the Tale, and Weave the Tale is going to make this thing, and I'm the guy that's got to do it. And that was a little frightening, but one of the things that kind of calmed me down was I was like, all right, you guys can learn from me just as much as I'm learning from you, because I was like, well, what if I mess up? What if I read something wrong? Well, hopefully it's not too big, but if it is, that could be something you learn. It's like, oh, this third party, this guy who's never read our stuff, wasn't part of the development, doesn't come over to our house and as we do our writing, writing binges or whatever it is you guys do. I'm sure that's what happens. You're all just sitting around a circle with quills and that. But, if I take it and I kind of make a mistake, well, okay, then that, like you said, did we write it clearly? What did we include? What made me think that? Did I read something from another section? Do we have it in a crazy spot? Because I think I remember when I think you guys had just made a change that you had the laws of magic in a different spot. And then as I was reading it, you guys were like, oh yeah. Yeah.
There's I put a ton of lore into the magic chapter that really needs to go over into the Aldris book. And I'm going to make that change once our editor has put all of her notes into the document. I don't want to change page numbers at the moment, but yeah.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
That's the editing process is a whole other thing.
Yeah, that is true. Weave the Tales put in there, and I forgot to say this. I was thinking it earlier, but then we got up. If anyone in the chat, you got a question for Brooke, essentially Broken Dice, go ahead and ask it. I don't know if you guys can use your points to get a question highlighted. You might be able to. I do not know. So if not, there's you guys aren't exactly being super, super chatty. Hey, Apacho! Some people from my other show, where there be... Oh, here's a good question. from Tdorf67, will there be a phonetic pronunciation table? So there we go with your hiring linguists. There is it, and I think in your defense, I think there is something near the back of the notes you gave me. It's just usually the last thing on my mind when I'm writing the story was like, oh, now how do I say that thing? So will there be a table?
So we do have the phonetic pronunciation guides that our conlayers provided us, and I've been thinking about putting them in for the people who are really intense about, role playing and getting to know the languages. But yeah, we can totally do that. It'd be just really easy to put in there.
I think it's definitely something we've struggled with a little bit, because it's neat to see this all written down, and it's like, oh, okay, because it has this kind of exotic feel to it. But then, at least us on the performance aspect, here you are, now say this word, and like they hand you the mic, you're like, oh, okay, So, but that's all right. I can recognize the words, but say them is a different thing. Just want to be in the ballpark, Tdor says. Yeah, no, that's kind of how we are. And I think that's true with a lot of games. Like when you get to the table, I remember first playing Vampire the Masquerade, or Vampire the Dark Ages at the time. And there's a clan called the Zamitsi, or like the Zymashe. There's like 7 different ways to say it. And wasn't until I started LARPing that I got exposed to like 3 other ways to say it too. So weird, but even simple, like even something that's based off of a language here on Earth is still, you're just still running there.
Yeah. I think that was like for me when Harry Potter came out and I learned that Hermione's name was pronounced that way. And I was like, excuse me, it's not Hermione.
Exactly. Yeah, it's one of those things to see those happen. We got a question here from Amberlyn. What about Warhammer were you happy to leave behind or change? I think that's going to be a lot, because I can see the connection now, but had you not said that, it would have been hard for me to pick it up.
So I guess the main thing was the D100, the percentile dice roll. So in a lot of tabletop RPG systems, you roll the dice and then it's pass or fail. And then in 40K and stuff, Dark Heresy, they have these, you can get ridiculous percentages, like 130%. Like our sniper was like at 140, but he could still fail if he rolled like an 80 or a 90 or something like that. So he's actually in the chat right now. So what we did was we added an extra layer that does require a slight learning curve, but it keeps your percentile roll within the D100 system. So like the max percentage you can go up to for your character, like if you max out one of your stats, it's somewhere up around 70. So, but what helps that is the skills and the success rating that you can add on to that. That's the really important thing.
Yeah, I remember when I was first learning it, and anytime you learn a new system, there's always that first awkward moment. You're like, okay, what does all this mean? But I remember I'm not a huge fan of percentile systems. Funny you say that. I do enjoy the 40K RPGs, not really for the system more than the setting than anything else. I also play Zweihander. I stream on their channel, and that's one of the few percentile systems that I enjoy, mainly because of all the extra stuff they've tacked onto it. They've included, not to go on about them, they've included a bunch of other extra things that are not present in Dark Heresy and things like that. So that was but outside of those particular things, it's hard to get me to like a percentile system. And the one thing I don't like, and when my initial impression of looking at your game, because I remember seeing numbers like 35, 26, and I'm like, how do you expect people to roll that low and still succeed? It's going to be hard to tie your shoe. And how like Dark Heresy does it is they give you, like, if it's an easy task, you give them a big bonus. But you guys have seemed to solve that by you start with a certain amount of success rating, so you don't actually have to roll below that. It just gives you a little bit of padding. So you're probably not going to fail at tying your shoe, but if you roll really bad, it might be, which I thought was it was a different way of solving that. Because one of my first problems I had with Dark Heresy was I had trouble remembering when I was running the game to tell people, oh yeah, get a plus 20 because this is a little easier. You know, this is kind of already there in the system because you have a starting amount of points that gives you a little bit of wiggle room.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So that's how we solved it. For us, it's sort of a marriage between the D100 like roll system and the D20 skill system, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. I
and
see.
someone just asked a question.
Yes, Ipacho 36. So one of my friends / fans from our other channel, they've come here to see some of the new stuff. Yeah, he actually mentioned earlier, is like, this is a very different thing to see me running. So it might have been asked, but as an absolute, you know, if it was asked, I apologize. If an absolute noob asks, what does Nuadan look like, implying the comparison between movies, series, and comic book, what would that answer be? So using some sort of established media, if you had to draw a comparison, you know, what would it be?
So I would say some of the shows and movies that influenced us, I would definitely say like The Legend of Korra, how they blended and advanced the technology in that show compared to The Last Airbender, I thought was just fantastic. A little bit of Dishonored, maybe not quite as grungy, but it definitely has that same sort of tech. I think if you could throw in a little bit of Guild Wars, and because they have some of the magic, but they also have a lot of the tech with the Asura and the Char and how their societies work. I think I'm looking at, because I wrote all this down, it'll be in the book, like, what was your inspiration? And so I list out like everything. I'm a huge fan of Treasure Planet. I love that movie so much.
I remember when I was kind of giving you the general idea, or was it Atlantis? When I was like, so, because that was just if you're watching the show, it's essentially they're looking for Atlantis. There's some twists on it, but when I wrote the story, I was like, this is an adventure world. It's about adventures, so let's have an adventure story and finding the missing civilization, especially in this world that's got it's been rocked by a cataclysm, not cataclysm, that's the singers. You know, a lot of stuff, you know, there's missing elements of it. So what, you know, I was like, let's start with a story. And that's actually when the cast was having trouble with some of the lore that I just kept dropping on them. I was trying to, one of the ways I kind of helped them feel better was like, guys, it's an adventure story. Like, if you make adventure decisions, they don't have to be completely based in lore. This is, you know, swing onto the other ship and let's have a fight. Go with it. I'm not putting you in the situation where you're going to be that deep in the lore that if you say something wrong, it's going to be contradicted on page 236 to such an in-depth that you're going to feel like, you know. And they were like, I was like, so it's an adventure story. We're having fun. And that kind of helped them because they've been trying to, you know, they've been getting through it because we have Alex, who's a singer. So she's obviously read up on them. But that's that one section, and I'll bring up that, like, I think when I talked about the story of the God Queen, they hadn't, I think, read a lot about Mirath because it was just like, oh, none of us are from here. So when I start just telling that lore, they were like, oh, okay, man, we didn't read that part. And I was like, which I think is actually just in regards to it, every time I would run a game, especially a new game for my friends growing up, they didn't know anything about the world. They would just sit down, you give them the premise, and then, so I was like, I didn't feel like it was their responsibility to know everything. Like, here's your premise, read these couple of pages, and it's an adventure story. Like, you know, we're not sitting here trying to, you know, reinvent it. So it was exciting there. I remember, and you brought up, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I was saying lore is, you know, it's like the meme, you know, it's a bit like guidelines. Because, I mean, who among us knows 100% of the lore for all the things that we love? We don't.
Exactly.
And that's part of the fun, to get to be a little creative in the sandbox that someone's made for you. and kind of stay within the boundaries. But don't. I'm not.
Yeah. Oh, they've embraced it. It was just kind of, this was a lot of our first, like I said, the first time we did it, we were kind of just asked as, hey, be a bunch of gamers and be on camera. And then we showed up in a ton of costumes and they were like, whoa. So when we were asked to do this by Weave, it was like, oh, we, suddenly felt like we were in the big leagues a little bit, like, oh, okay. And everybody was very worried. And I was kind of like, but I feel like the important thing for this is present this. This is what a game would look like, except, all of my cast members are extra and they like wearing outfits and stuff like that. Oh, there's a fun question for you. How do you like your cosplay so far?
Oh my gosh, I love the cosplays. They're so much fun, and it really helps distinguish the different characters. I'm trying to pick my favorite character. I'm really partial to the dark and brooding like protagonist, so I really like Jonathan's character a lot. Of course,
I like Jonathan too. That's
Mitch and Rokar are just hilarious every episode, and I always look forward to his shenanigans.
Yeah, indeed. I've liked the cat. Obviously, I picked these people. I picked these people, and then Mitch was like, "Hey, I want to be in it," and I was like, "Oh, okay." So I picked everyone but Mitch. Mitch was like, "I'm gonna be in it. Is that okay?" And I was like, "I guess." So it worked out. But no, it was when I picked these people, I knew they would do pretty well. And like I said, we kind of had this idea, we were asked to do it. So it was like, oh, it's a big deal. And I knew all of the casts that I'd worked with before were going to put 110% into it. I like Alex's costuming with the Sodarian tattoos. Catherine's got that cool hood. It's unfortunate just because of her headphones, she can't put it up all the time. But
yeah,
everyone, yeah. And Apache, Jonathan is an awesome player. Characters, yeah. John brings it. My favorite thing about John is John and I, we probably are the ones that argue the most behind the scenes. I don't want to say argue. John challenges me, and I'm kind of at first like, what? How dare you? And then when we talk about it, usually what we end up with is much better than I started. So John is the most vexing, but I don't want to say that, vexing, but every time he makes a decision or something has a question that I don't necessarily, in the first 3 seconds, I'm like, well, no, but we talk about it. And then where we both, the decision is much better.
Yeah.
So that's,
and of course, I love Raquel's, who plays Talira. I love her energy and how she plays her character. I think it's great as well.
Yeah, I think we got a nice eclectic group. I kind of thought of like, oh, like I said, action comedy. I wanted this where my other shows were very dark. Not that Nuadan Chronicles can't be dark, but when I looked at this and when I saw the trailer that we played before, I was like, this is fun. This is, I should say there's some really dark art, and I remember seeing it. I'm like, oh man. But I feel like swinging from airships that's what I wanted. Swinging from airships, and things like that.
Yeah, I would say, because I'm a big fan of grim darkness. I love that kind of stuff. So with Nuadan Chronicles, I would say it's more unexpected grim darkness. Like, you'll just be going along an adventure and then something will happen that's horrifying and you weren't expecting it, kind of thing.
Okay, yeah. Well, there's also, I know we have talked, and we'll keep a mum's the word on like what I'm thinking for the end. And actually, another fun part about working with you is that like I said it was before, I'll like, I have this idea, and then you guys will be like, oh, well, here's this other thing that either isn't in the book or is buried somewhere. So you've been making little extra files for me that just have that section because it's easier to find than trying to dig it up. But yeah, that's I'm excited in regards to certain things like that in the future. See, I don't know if I missed a question. Nope, I guess I didn't. No, all right. Well, there we go. So I have a question.
Go ahead.
No, it's no. Hey, this is you and I chatting here for a little bit, so people can learn more about the Nuadan Chronicles. And since everybody else was having a terrible day, so we got to keep it going. So, what were you gonna say?
Well, I was gonna bring up that because we were talking before the stream started about like running a Kickstarter for the first time. So I didn't know if you wanted to jump into that, or
That's
if you had
exactly
it.
where I was going. I was about ready to. There we go. So,
Okay,
and
we're
just
on
so
the same page.
yeah, as a creative person, but I'm sure I've thought a million times like, oh man, I could probably take this thing. My other show on the Zweihander channel, Silver and Blood, I wrote that world, and my intention was to use their kind of like you can make it under their license and you get half the proceeds. I have a lot of it written, but I didn't go that extra step. So and the step beyond that would be Kickstarter if it was my own thing. So I'm always like, well, what would that be like? But apparently one day Jason said, hey, Brooke, we're making an RPG. And there you go. So I guess, can you tell us the story briefly on what got you to that process? What is it like running a Kickstarter and things like that? What did you learn?
So I would recommend if anyone's thinking about doing a Kickstarter or just it's like preparing for a wedding. And it's like preparing for a wedding that lasts an entire month.
Oh my.
So they say the minimum, and this is so true, the minimum you need to get ready is 3 months. You really want to give yourself 6 months. You really want that. Even longer, 9 months or a year. You start building up to it. You start contacting people. You start figuring out the assets that you want, and getting everything ready. And we scrambled. I think ours was a bit spur of the moment. We had about 4 or 5 months to prepare, and the last month was just constant crunch to get ready for it. One of the things that was not told to us when you do a Kickstarter is that when you set up the page, because you can set it all up beforehand behind the scenes and draft it, you can have people subscribe to it. You can put a little page that gives them a reminder that, hey, when this goes live, they'll get a notification. We turned that on probably 24 hours before it went on because we're like, oh, this is an option. We didn't realize this. So that's an option.
Oh.
You can have while you're still building your page, it doesn't have to be ready. There's an option for you to set up for potential backers to reserve for when your Kickstarter goes live. The other thing is, I remember it was 3 a.m. and we're trying to get ready to push this thing live, and it wanted like bank information, and it said this could take 36 hours to go through, and we're like, oh my god, we're about to go live in 6 hours. No. But then it went through after a few seconds, but that was like really stressful.
Gotcha.
So
it's
there's going to be
a background check. It could take 6 months, but it's usually back sooner.
I wish I could have I wish there was a tutorial out there somewhere that someone who's gone through the back end and will show you all the different panels that are back there, because it's very different to go into a Kickstarter for the first time and be completely unfamiliar with everything. And you think you know what you have to do, and then you get into it and you're just like, oh, this is super involved. Or that Kickstarter doesn't process like the payments and everything, or any of or not the payments, but the rewards. The rewards you either handle yourself or you get a third party to help you with that, and that's what we did through BackerKit. So it's intense. It's very intense.
So sticking with Kickstarter, so it goes live, and obviously you guys got enough to get your game made, but I can't. What's that like? Like watching the numbers go up. I don't even know how long it took you guys. So, I assume that's a fun experience. So why don't you tell me about that?
Right. The numbers don't go up without you putting in hard work beforehand. Like it's not just this magical thing that happens. And so one of the things that I read is, and this is how Kickstarter works, like the psychology of it. You have your attainable goal, and you want to hit, I can't remember what percentage of that by a certain point. You hit a certain percentage of that attainable goal, which is roughly about 25% of what you actually want. And then when people see that, 'cause when it gets funded within 24 to 48 hours, when it's funded, then more people want to give money into it. So I had the goal that was on our Kickstarter, but I had the actual goal that I wanted to hit, which was a completely different number. So we hit that funding goal within the first 48 or 36 hours, I believe. And generally when projects do that, if they can hit that within the first 1 to 2 or 3 days, your Kickstarter will be successful, because you push and push and push throughout the month. And then at the very end, within the last 24 to 48 hours, there's that final wave of decision makers who've been hanging on and we're looking to see if your Kickstarter was successful or not. So you need to be putting in the marketing beforehand. We experimented with Facebook ads. Kickstarter allows you link tracking to see where stuff is coming in. We tried Twitter ads. And then we'll see that like half of our backers came just finding us on Kickstarter on the discovery page. So it's really important that you try and get on the discovery page as well. And then the other half was us marketing and pushing. And while the month of Kickstarter is happening, you need to have interviews set up ahead of time. Don't be messaging people during your Kickstarter. You need to have interviews set up a month, 2 months, 3 months ahead of time, so that when your Kickstarter goes live, all of that starts dropping as soon as it goes live. So articles, blogs, you can guest star on a show, a podcast, research and connect with as many people as you can to get as many mouths talking about your game as possible, so that if one person doesn't hear it in this section of social media, they're going to hear it on this section of social media.
So now I'm going back, here's how did it feel though? Like, I mean,
sorry.
Were you up late at night? Yeah, no, I mean, that's cool info, but I want to know how Broken Dice / Brooke felt.
So after you put in all that work and you go without all that sleep, it feels really good to see the numbers tick up and to see people talking about it and, retweeting, and it gives you that sort of like validation. I know you're supposed to like just believe in what you're making and enjoy it regardless of the outcome, but it still feels really good to see other people who look at what you've made and go, that's cool, that's interesting, I want to give it a try. And so it was a huge validation for us, because being just us two mostly and just only play testing with friends or at Gen Con, it was great to see the support that we got on our Kickstarter. And we can't wait to finish the project and then actually see people play it like you guys are.
God, no, like I said, that was just kind of my thing thinking about it, because like as learned a lot here, like, if you're going to do that and have these interviews and things like that. And as someone who just kind of got into streaming recently, like, I mean, I have an interview show on another channel. That's why I was like, oh yeah, we can totally do something tonight. I've done this before. I'm totally an expert. I've done it 4 times, but just hearing things like that was like, okay, this, me kind of just putting it together, just looking for content for a channel. I've just been reaching out to people like, hey, I'm going to talk about your game. And then, especially these smaller companies like, oh, that's great. Do you want us to come on? That was really exciting for me. So that's why I was like, I wonder what it's like to be on the other end of that, because it's got to be really exciting. I just can't imagine, what it's like. You said that validation, like, okay, put all this effort into it. Like I wrote this other setting. In my opinion, I would be excited if 10 people actually read it. Like I'd be like, oh, that's kind of neat. But the idea of like, oh, well, okay. Does anybody want to give any money to actually get this done? Oh, you guys do? Oh, that's really nice. Oh, wow, that's cool. And like I saw your guys' Kickstarter. It was actually I didn't hear about it, which is a little strange for me because I tend to not that I know everything that happens in the RPG industry. That's not true, but I'm pretty up to date. So I hadn't heard about this, and when Weave the Tale approached me, they kind of gave me a couple of the games, and yours was I would say was a very interesting Kickstarter. Like in that first picture you guys have of this like the group behind an energy shield fighting off some unseen attackers outside a frame. I was like, oh, that looks really neat. At the time, I was actually at work. I got a text and I was like, oh, yeah, sure, maybe. And they sent me the links, and I think yours was one that opened. I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll think about it. And then I got home and watched the rest of it and ran the idea by a couple of people that I know. Like, so should I do this? Because, I mean, now I feel like I'm pretty good at this, or I've learned that I'm actually not too bad at it. But at the time, it was like, oh, I had a pretty good cult show. Like that went really well. And I think half the reason that went so well is because my friends look awesome, looking terrible. But it was, doing something else. And so, but yeah, it was the Kickstarter that sold me to do this one over the others. So, I was excited. So are you enjoying the show so far?
Yes, we look forward to it every Tuesday. So I'm always looking forward to the character interactions, especially, and I get hyped every time the trailer comes on. I think whoever put it together, you guys did a great job.
Well, there you go. That's someone behind the scenes here. I didn't do any of that. I think I gave they ask me for things from time to time of like, well, okay, what my favorite bit, we had a typo, is what was it? They were like, they asked me, they're like, Adam, can you give us the title of the first episode and a synopsis? And I was like, on it. That was my response, was I'm on it. I will respond after that. And then I gave the thing. And then they, I think, erroneously titled it On It. And I was like, But I saw that you guys had tweeted today that you guys had come up with your own titles, which I really liked.
So
for the episode.
Episode 4 was given a title.
That was the one I came up with ahead of time. Yeah, that was the one I was ready with.
And the other one, the others I just came up with myself. They reference different things that happen each episode. So I don't know if you guys want to take
better
them,
than I came up with.
But
what was I going to say? Sorry, it's getting late here. It's not that late. I don't know what's going on. But so we were talking about the episodes, me writing it, and it just totally left my head. I don't know what it was. But so no, that's it. Yes, the Tomb of the Watcher. Just this is probably more for us, and I feel like you guys out there are gonna feel a little left out. But did you expect me to put a Watcher underwater? Or did you even expect me to use that small little sidebar that's referenced in this one little section? Did you expect that? Because I don't think I told you that until like just before. Am I throwing curveballs at you? I guess is the is the question.
No, I was really intrigued, and I was impressed that you seized on that bit of lore, because it's that sort of pseudo-religious sci-fi sort of thing that we have in the game, and it's cool that you tied it in, because that's how it's sort of meant to be tied in. It's
because for those that don't know. For those that don't know, and I'm sure Brooke will completely correct me if I'm wrong, there's you don't know there's a sidebar. Small little sidebar. It talks about these things that move in the sky, these little lights. And the God Queen is like the North Star, as it were, is kind of her representation in the sky. So the Marathi religion kind of sees them as the people that watch. But like I think with telescopes, you can see that it's something. And it's implied very heavily that it's a spaceship. But they, at least, And that's one thing in the lore I've kind of had trouble with, which I feel like that's something each GM will take, is how much does the average person or even people in power know about this technology, how far advanced and all that the Shard Empire was. So would it enter your mind that that's a spaceship, or is it, like you said, it was quasi religious to the Marathi, that this thing up there? So the idea of this is the tomb of a watcher, that's what it would be from their perspective. It's a tomb, it is something holy. But in reality, I say in air quotes because we'll never know, and I should say, I don't think it's going to be explicitly in the lore book, and every GM should totally change it up. What is it? Is it alive? Were they godlike? Did they have so far ahead with magic and technology? Who knows? But you did actually you brought up that one of your inspirations was Dishonored, and the Tomb Guardian was just in my mind straight up one of the clockwork creatures from Dishonored. I was like, okay, there you go. Oh, we gotta mention.
We've been inspired because we're just like, well, yeah, we've got all this tech. We need to have like robots that are just running around in some of these ancient ruins that still manage to hold themselves together. And so we've been writing up some of their stats this past weekend. So that's been fun.
There you go. I'd say the enjoying thing I like about this is I like watching you guys get excited, and then like I'll say something on air, and then sometimes I feel like you guys will either seize on that, or if you were already doing it in general, right? Like I said, the Dragon Spit from our first episode, I think was probably the most fun the cast kind of had, and I think it really helped them feel like, even though we've been kind of given the privilege and the responsibility of kind of being the first time the world, the internet sees your game, it's a little daunting to us, but the idea that, we just made this up and then you guys were embracing it, I think there's, like I said, there's the drink on your Twitter and all that. It kind of made everyone like, okay, all right, we're doing this. Like, we made something up, but, there's always that fear that like, oh, what if they don't like it? I think, and that was very nice of you guys. It kind of took a lot of weight off of everyone's shoulders, outside of the fact of me scaring everyone with various lore drops.
I know me and Jason, when we were watching and we've been talking to you, and then we're like, are we being a little overwhelming? Should we back off a little bit? But no, like, and that's, I think, partially, like, Jason is that's his GM style. He's a very spontaneous, spur of the moment GM. He can take something that players give to him, and then he runs with it. So I think that's the same thing with what you guys do, honestly.
Yeah, but that was just fun. I would say so far, I would say that was the most fun I had. Just that little thing, that and doing the makeup for the Jengu last minute. I was kind of always like, I try to do something different each week if I can. Like, let's have a different character, a different look for me. In my other show, where it was more horror based, and I got to make everything up for the most part, we would always like take a break. I'd cover my camera and I'd go and be like, oh, I'm this terrifying monster. This show, I'm not doing that because I feel like that's just kind of like, no, it's fun, so I showed up with all that. In hindsight, I would love to go back and change the way I did it, but that I think I decided to do the Jengu makeup like literally an hour before showtime. I was like, okay, well, I think I was going to do someone else. I think I was going to probably, maybe before then, they were going to meet the Inquisition or the Water Seer. I'm like, okay, we'll get the hood and all that. And then I started thinking like, oh, wait, maybe it'll take, I think the Jengu will be more interesting, but, I'm never going to look like the incredible art that I got to see that you guys didn't of the Jengu, very serpent. Like, I can't do that. I mean, if I could do that, hope, I'm not getting paid enough to do all that kind of prosthetic work and don't have that amount of time.
I was like, yeah, we need to be getting paid for that.
Yeah, so I was just like, oh, I picked up like a just multicolor of different colored makeup to kind of go make up any palette I want. And I was like, okay, maybe this, and it looks so much better, I think, in person than it did on camera. I think it worked okay on camera, but if I could go back, I'd probably fix it up. Let's see here. And oh, well, thank you, Weave the Tail. My improv has always been on point. I try. I try. I think I wouldn't be surprised if that's part of the reason. What got me onto this was I actually worked with Penny for a Tale. Before I started my cult show, they asked me, like, hey, just do an audition. But then they randomly asked us to be in one of their shows, like with 20 minutes prep. And we just made everything up as we went. And then they were like, all right, you can do it. So, and then here we are. So all right, guys, I think we're gonna be wrapping up here soon. But if you guys got any last minute questions for Brooke at Broken Dice Games, anything about that, anything about the show in general, maybe some, you know what? Maybe I can give a little hint. There we go. So what was supposed to happen tonight, or what's going to probably be happening next, is we're going to learn a little bit more. And I'm not sure. It's one of those things. I know all the backstory, but sometimes I forget what I've said out loud here. We're going to learn a little bit more of why Einar and Ziathania don't like each other. We're going to learn a little bit more about that next episode and some backstory. And if it works out, you may find out why Rokar left Ziathania on an island. If that works out, like we have a lot. Sometimes it doesn't always get out in the time that I thought it was going to. For example, the episode with the Jengu, I thought we were going to get a little further. So actually, like, last episode was half of what I thought was going to be in the previous episode. But sometimes when the players are going and I feel like it's fun to watch and it's engaging, I'll just let it play out, even if I have to course correct later, because we can always skip something down the line. And we'll be visiting here in the next couple episodes. We'll be visiting other places in Uldris and getting a little bit. Hopefully, if things work out, the tone's gonna change a little bit. It's gonna be a little less, I would say, Pirates of the Caribbean, and I'm gonna switch it up and do something a little different. And more crazy religious zealots. I do really enjoy zealots so much. I do. It's religion makes people do crazy things, sometimes crazy positive things and crazy terrible things. So I'm actually curious. I think I may have mentioned to you, Brooke. I'm not sure if I told you what I was thinking about for the not the big bad, but the other thing, as I'm gonna probably just confusing everyone out there watching us, but I'm wondering. I think I did. When we get off, I'll tell you all about it. And I'm sure,
Okay.
I think yeah. There you go. Or I'll just make it up, just make it up, and then you'll have to add that to the book last minute. It won't be dragons, but it'll be something core. And you'll be like, oh, what are we gonna do? Or a nice little sidebar. If you watched our show, Adam was just BS and don't. All right, guys. I think that's about it. Well, let's go ahead through here. I want to thank Brooke for last minute deciding to come on the show and just talk about the Nuadan Chronicles, because some of the cast members had a tough week coming up. I had to dig. I live here in Denver, and we just had like 2 feet of snow dropped on us, and I had to dig 2 cars out of the snow, so it got a little crazy there. Yeah, so that was fun. But I want to thank Broken Dice Games. What do you have? Mighty Norwal Production. Let me pull up all the sponsors here. I have it on Discord, but I have to close Discord or else it completely interrupts my sound. Teddy Bomber Snow, Lucky. I guess so. Denver's really weird when it comes to snow, because the sun is very intense here, so it melts pretty quickly. So sometimes they don't really do anything about it, because the sun will take care of it in 2 days. Where I'm initially from the Midwest, where you have to move it because it will stay forever. So yeah, it was here, and it already looks like it's already melting. It was terrible this morning because all the melting runoff had frozen into a sheet of ice, so I slipped and fell this morning. Hurt my wrist and all. Yeah, it was not fun. That's okay. So that's why when I was like, all right, let's maybe everybody else will take a break today, and we will just talk about this. Where are we? Hold on here. I seem so professional when I do this, right, guys? This is so the fancy. Here we are, I believe. Let's get to our sponsors here. So yes, so this season on Weave the Tale, I want to thank Black Void Games, Evil Hat Production, Christopher Gray, Smunchy Games, of course, as I said several times, Broken Dice, Brooke. We can actually say we can thank Brooke. Thank Brooke. Mighty Norwal, Arcana Media, which so I, again, every week, I think I'm saying it right. Nobody's said anything terrible to me yet. So, and it's in the chat if you guys want to go check out all of those fun and interesting games. I've seen a couple of the shows. I've enjoyed them. So it's been tons of fun. Teddy Bomber says, thank you, Brooke. And Weave the Tale, everyone else's. So yes, if you've enjoyed watching me ramble about different stuff and different gamings, you're more than welcome to catch me over at TTRP Theater, where about twice a month, even though it's been kind of on every Wednesdays, I talk about just different topics in gaming. I interviewed Wildfire Games, By Night Studios. It's not on my channel, but I will totally count it that I've interviewed Broken Dice Games. So if you just want to see us talk about that, go check us out, TTRP Theater, as well as my other show, Sinners and Saints. You can also see me on Commander RPG. So yeah, that's if you've had enough with me. If you have watched this and you weren't already excited about the Nuadan Chronicles, but now you are, the backer kit is open for you to pre-order the Nuadan Chronicles. There's a core book, and there's also the lore book. So those are the two separate ones. So if you get them, that's what comes together. That's what you're going to need to play the game. That's where you'll be able to learn all about this incredible world, the Watchers, the God Queen, the Water Seers, all that stuff, the Wardens, and their crazy political system, which I'm hoping we'll get into a little bit next game or the game after. So I shouldn't say crazy, interesting. I like little details on how worlds work. So that was one of the first chapters I went to. So that being said, hope everyone had a great time. We're going to sign off a little early tonight. Go watch something else and enjoy your night. And I will see you guys next week, hopefully for episode 5 of the Nuadan Chronicles, The Lost Isle of Mist. Take care.
These are the tales we weave. Tales of magic. Tales of mystery. Tales exploring the beyond. And while we continue to grow, even more adventures await. In the depths of the unknown. Will you join us in the telling?